Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, House Bill 5039A is the budget for the Department of Veterans Affairs. Now, Mr. Speaker, normally when we present budgets like this, we present a formal report that contains a great deal of required information, and there are numbers and there are details. And a lot of times when you listen to these reports, it's a little bit difficult to discern what the big picture is. So I'd like to do something a little bit unusual, Mr. Speaker, and that is to step back and try and describe what I believe the big picture is with this budget for the Department of Veterans Affairs. And it begins with this, Mr. Speaker, that last session, this body sent a measure to the voters of Oregon in an effort, a well-placed effort, to increase substantially the funding that we provide for those that have served. And that measure went to the ballot as Measure 96 and passed by an extraordinarily overwhelming number of votes. And the expectation in those votes was that we would maintain the current service level of $10 million, but also provide lottery funding to the amount of roughly $18 million. So the expectation is that we would pass this budget, for about $28 million in veteran services. And when we came here at the beginning of the session, of course, as you all know, we were facing a substantial budget shortfall. And so we went into our various budgeting silos, our different committees, and looked at reductions. And the reduction that was posted for the Department of Veterans Affairs contained the $18 million in lottery funding, but had no money at all from the general fund for the current service level. And so my committee has been working these last 6 months to try and find and restore that $10 million of funding. Now, I want to step back and I want to thank the members of the committee, and I certainly want to thank my co-chair, Senator Johnson. I want to thank the co-chairs of the other policy committees, Representative Evans and Senator Boquist, for their substantial support. And Mr. Speaker, I particularly want to thank the staff down in LFO who worked day and night to help us pull this budget back together. And those of you that are working budgets, colleagues, know how difficult it is in this current environment to find new money. And so the budget that we're presenting today reflects, quite candidly, some substantial cuts and some other damn fine programs in order to get to where we are. And this is where we are, Mr. Speaker, and it is that we've got not the $18 million in lottery funds that were projected, but actually an increasing that to $18.7 million. And then in the general fund area, we have committed $7.5 million to the department directly in this budget, and the expectation of another $2.5 million in general fund supported general obligation bonds that would go for 2 veteran homes in Oregon, one in Lebanon and one in the Dalles. And so together, those 2 commitments would total out the additional $10 million. But there's actually more. There's more because in a separate budget, we have committed additional monies to OHA from Veterans Mental Health Services, totaling an additional $2.5 million. So we're not looking at 28. We're certainly not looking at 18. We're not looking at 28. We're not even looking at 28.7. We're looking at roughly $31 million for veterans programs. That's a budget I'm proud of. That's a story I'm proud of, and I'm proud to have been part of the effort to pull this back together. And I would tell you, Mr. Speaker, I don't recall another occasion in a budgeting subcommittee where the co-chair teared up when making the motion to pass the budget, and after it passed, that a room full of people, a room full of men and women who had served, many of them still in uniform, stood up and applauded. That was a remarkable moment. So let me get to the nuts and bolts, and I apologize for giving you a rather extended background, but I think the big picture is important. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 5039 is the budget bill for the Oregon Department of Veterans Affairs. The mission of the Department of Veterans Affairs is to serve and honor veterans through leadership, advocacy, and strong partnerships. The Joint Committee on Ways and Means approved a total fund budget of $509.9 million in 94 positions. Lottery funds expenditure limitation of $12.9 million available through the passage of Measure 96 is included in the budget. Total lottery revenue dedicated to veteran services is projected to be $18.7 million. $18.7 million for the 2017-19 biennium, and will be allocated to the department for budgeted lottery funds expenditures, with the balance being retained in the constitutionally dedicated Veterans Service Fund. The budget also includes $8.5 million of general fund, which includes $7.5 million for veteran services. Again, there's that $7.5 million for veteran services and $1 million for debt service on outstanding bonds. The approved budget includes doubling the current service level funding to county veteran service officers and national service organizations, shifting fundings for veteran services from other funds supported by home loan revenues to lottery funds, a veterans crisis and suicide prevention hotline, a lottery funds allocation to address veterans housing and homelessness issues, and establishing a reserve balance in the Veterans Service Fund. 6 new positions were approved to accommodate increased statewide support services, aging veteran services, and home loan compliance. Mr. Speaker, the Joint Committee on Ways and Means recommends approval of House Bill 5039 as amended, and I certainly am proud to stand here today and urge its passage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Gomberg, do you wish to close?
He does. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, colleagues, for an important conversation here and for your detailed questions. Our Oregon veterans deserve no less than careful consideration of this budget. And I, too, want to thank the veterans in this chamber that have served, but I think the veterans that are in this body are probably doing pretty well. I want to talk for a moment about the veterans across the state of Oregon, 7 out of 10 of whom are not even enrolled in our veterans program. 7 out of 10 aren't in the system. And one of the things that I'm particularly proud of in this budget is the fact that we're doubling the number of county veteran service officers in an attempt to better reach out to that population. And we're enhancing our programs on campus to reach out to veterans who are trying to get reestablished in their communities. And we're forming telephone assistance lines to prevent suicide and for help with mental health. And those are the elements of this budget that I find so very, very satisfying. Now, we're talking about numbers here. We're talking about numbers. And I want to help my good friend from Kaiser with the math here. And we'll start with the lottery dollars. I don't think there's any discussion, any debate about the lottery dollars. We talked about 18 million. We're actually at 18.7 million. So let's just, for round numbers, let's say $18 million there. And then we've got 7.5, which is in this budget right in front of us. And the rest of the conversation is the $2.5 million that we're talking about in general fund dollars that would go to support veterans' homes, and another $2.5 million that's going to OHA. So we've got 18, we've got 7.5, we've got 2.5, we've got 2.5, which I believe adds up to about 31. About 31. I think that's the simple math that we're talking about here. And one of my colleagues here talked today about the fact that budgets are about choices. Well, they certainly are about choices, but they're also about results. And I think that's what we need to focus on here is what are the results that we're going to affect here? Because the process, colleagues, the process isn't that we just can't pile all the money from these different programs into one budget. Sometimes we have to fund them out of different pockets to get to the same result. And I believe that's what we're trying to accomplish here because we don't have options in the budgeting process to say, well, we're going to take that money from OHA, we're going to put it directly into the veterans budget. We're going to take that money for capital construction, we're going to put it directly into the veterans budget. We don't get to do it that way. But at the end of the day, what matters most is the results and the total dollars, which I believe come to about 31. But let me talk about that for just a minute because we really haven't focused on the money that's going to OHA. And I'm going to refer you to page 9 of the OHA budget report, which says that a total of $2.5 million will be used for Veterans Behavioral Health Services, and OHA will work with the Oregon Department of Veterans Affairs and other stakeholders to identify a process to fund programs and services which improve behavioral health outcome for Oregon's veterans. We can't put that in this budget. Does that mean that veterans aren't going to get the benefit of this services? Do we think that the money we're spending on mental health for veterans isn't on the front lines of this fight that we're having today? Because it isn't in this budget, it's not on the front lines? That money's on the front lines, colleagues. Now let's talk about the $2.5 million that we want to use to upgrade our veterans' homes in Lebanon and the Dalles. And the veterans that are living there, are they not on the front lines? Because they're not in this budget? Are they not on the front lines? Are we not making a difference in their lives and the lives of their families, Mr. Speaker? Because we're not putting it in this budget? At the end of the day, what matters is the results. I'm proud of this budget. I'm proud of the work that we're doing for Oregon veterans, and I'm determined that we continue to do a better job for all of them. And my good friend from Sun River, I think he makes a valid point. What will be the current service level in 2 years if we're spreading this money into different pockets? That's an issue. I don't know if I'll be back. I don't know if all of you will be back. And I don't know where we'll be serving and what committee structure when we do. But let's remember that conversation. Let's remember the point that what we really want is a starting point of 10, not 7.5, if we're going to be fair and keep faith with the people that sent us here and the voters that adopted this measure that we're discussing today by over 80%. A point well taken, Representative, and I appreciate you raising it. But again, at the end of the day, what matters most is results. And I think we've got a budget here that generates results for people that deserve our support. And so I would urge you to vote yes on this budget and the budgets that are connected to it for a total package that supports our Oregon veterans and the state of Oregon at the level that they anticipated when they passed the measure that brought us to this point. A yes vote, Mr. Speaker, is a good thing. Thank you.